Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Compass North Richland Hills. My name is Luke Davidson. I'm the campus pastor here, and I hope you had a really good, happy Thanksgiving. I certainly did. We ate a ton. Joe ate a ton. I made a hilarious decision, which I think was sort of a great decision, also maybe not a great timed decision. But on Thursday, we ate food all day. Of course, it was Thanksgiving. We just kind of spaced it out well. On Friday, I'm thinking, I've got my in-laws are in town. We wanted to go try a new restaurant, to check it out. So we went to Heim Barbecue on Friday. It's really good. But it was like a pound of meat on a sandwich. And I was so unbelievably full. It was a great tasting decision, maybe not the best timed decision to do that. But we went down and we walked through the botanical garden and just had, over a few days, really nice time together. So I hope that you had a great time with your family and was restoring and rejuvenating for your soul and your mind over the past couple of days. And maybe even got to focus on things that you were thankful for. I hope that you were able to do that. We're going to talk about being thankful and grateful for some things here a little later in the message. But the past few days have also been great if you're a football fan. Anybody? So first of all, the most recent thing, last night, A&M and LSU went into 7 overtimes and A&M came out on top. Holy cow, 7 overtimes. I think I saw it was the highest scoring game in the FBS period. So anyways, that's crazy. Also, the Cowboys have won 3 in a row. That's a big deal. What in the heck? I was talking, so our worship leader, Andrew, is a big Cowboys fan, always has been. And he's like, just when you think they're going to let you down, they just rope you back in. So I'm engaged. They've got me back. And then, of course, high school football is like at its peak right now. And we're really proud. Birdville High School right next to us won their game. They're going on to the playoffs next week. They played Grapevine. Did you know this? So we got a little cross mid-city rivalry game next week. And then, of course, we don't want to forget Haltom High School. It's just continuing to roll. Trinity's doing really well. So make sure you go out and support our local schools and their teams over the next week or so. Hey, today we're finishing out a series we've been in the last few weeks called Crazy Like Us. And what we've been talking about is how to be generous, which is such a perfect theme for this part of the year. The holidays, being thankful, being generous. The reality is most of us, that whole condition, this whole holiday situation really stresses us out because we're thinking about, I got to spend all this and maybe you don't have the money and it just feels tight and it feels worrisome. And this area, this time of the year where we actually want and desire to have peace and joy. The songs that we sing have those words again and again and again. And I'm telling you, what we're discussing in this series is meant to help you reorder your life so that you can have peace, so that you can have joy. And so the things that you actually want to be a part of, the things that your heart actually breaks for, you can actually say, you know what, that's a priority for me. I don't feel guilt. I don't feel frustrated or anxious about money. I feel peace. And that's what we're trying to help you do. And so through this series, the promise that we've made to you, it's a crazy promise, but the promise is this, that when you become generous, you will give more, you will save more, and you will consume less. That's crazy, isn't it? Turn to your neighbor and say, that's crazy. It's crazy. I didn't say whisper to your neighbor. Say to your neighbor, that's crazy. That's crazy, isn't it? Now, here's what's even crazier. If you were here the first week of the series, and if you missed any of these messages, you can go back and listen to them, and I hope that you will. But Jesus also said you'll be happier. He said it's more blessed to give than receive. And the word blessed, translated, you could also translate it the word happy. He's saying happier is the person who orders their life around giving rather than just receiving. Not just giving when a need arises or when there's a spontaneous situation or a disaster and it's like, I guess I'll give some to that. No, you've actually made it a part. You've ordered your life around generosity. He says it's just a happier, blessed life. It's a blessed condition to be in. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on. What we talked about is that when we are not ordered around generosity, we fall into a crazy cycle. This is what most of us do in the Western world, is we spend everything that we make, maybe more than we make, and then we go into silly debt sometimes on things that maybe we didn't even really need. We just wanted them. And honestly, no judgment. Do what you want to do. But it's so funny to me that we will wait hours in line. And I've done this before on Black Friday. We will wait hours for stuff we don't even need. We don't even need it. I just want it so bad that I will go stand outside. And here in Texas, you can actually do it and you don't freeze to death. Like earlier in my life, I lived in parts of the country in Cincinnati and Louisville. We're staying out out, it'd be freezing, and you're out there, I'm gonna do it because I just want this thing so bad. And it was such a great first world problem that we don't have to stand in line for what we need. We just will voluntarily stand in line for stuff we want so badly. And sometimes we can't afford it though. We'll go into debt, we have no margin. It creates worry and anxiety in our lives. And what do you do when you're worried and anxious about money? I got to spend it, right? That's how I relieve stress, is go to the mall or buy stuff or go to the dealership and buy a truck or get a boat or whatever it is. We've all got our thing, and just spend it, and you fall into this crazy cycle. And we think that more money is the solution. If I had more money, I wouldn't spend all of it. If I had more money, I wouldn't be in debt. If I had more money, I wouldn't have such a tiny margin in my finances. Not true though, is it? Because if you had more money, you just spend it. And that's the way we know this is people who win the lottery. 70% of people who win the lottery and get like 20 times more than they ever had before, 70% of them will go bankrupt. That was reported in 2016 by Teresa Murray. That means that just getting a whole chunk of money does not mean it's going to solve your problems. The core issue with these things is maybe self-control or contentment or discipline. And then the worry, you think more money, I wouldn't worry anymore. No, that's not the case, because people that make 50%, 100% more than you, they still worry. Billionaires still worry. It's a spiritual problem because we trust in riches rather than in the one who richly provides. This is a cycle that we've talked about over the last couple weeks. Again, if you missed any of those messages, go back and listen to them. This is a cycle where we feel like I'm the owner. If it came to me, it's for me to consume. It's all mine. It's all for me. And what we've tried to discover is that I am not the owner. God is the owner. I'm just managing his stuff. And just because it came to me doesn't mean that it's necessarily for me. You change your mentality, change the way you think, and it shifts everything. And essentially what we said was that generous people don't assume that it's theirs to consume. It's a shift in your thinking. Just because it came to me doesn't mean it's necessarily for me, it might be for someone else. And I've got this, generous people think this way, I've got this great opportunity, even a responsibility to make sure that what came to me gets to where God wanted it to go. It might be for someone else. What a great opportunity, what a great responsibility, what a great sense of purpose and fulfillment, and something that'll actually make you feel content. And even proud. I'm not trying to say that you should be excessive in pride, but you should be proud of yourself. When you order your life around generosity, you can say, you know what? I did what God called me to do. And I'm proud of you for doing that. I can say that. Generous people don't assume that it's theirs to consume. And you break the crazy cycle by doing something really simple. Today, I'm going to tell you, I know it's the past couple weeks have been the build-up. You're like, how are we going to do this? It's actually very, very simple. Today, we're going to take the thing that is usually the last priority, the last thing that we do financially, which is giving, and I'm going to ask you to make it the very first thing you do. That seems very simple. It will change everything about the way you view money. You take the thing that's at the end. It's like, well, I spend everything, I save some. If I have any left over, then I'll give it. If somebody motivates me, if somebody inspires me or guilts me enough, or if everybody's getting in their wallet and I'm like, well, people are watching me, I'll reach in, I guess I'll throw a few bucks in. It's kind of the leftover thing. And you make that instead the very first thing you do. I don't care if it's a small amount for you, you just make it the first thing you do, and it's gonna reorder everything in your life. And you're gonna see how it affects and trickles down to everything. It creates purpose and contentment in your life and actually makes you feel like, you know what? I'm being responsible with this opportunity that God has given to me, that I'm not just going to assume that if it just came to me that it's necessarily for me. You reorder everything. This is the example that we see in the Bible, that Christians would order their communities, their lives, around generosity. An example of this is the Apostle Paul. Paul was one of the guys who saw Jesus after Jesus rose from the dead. He's like, holy cow, I was wrong. I thought this guy was an imposter. I actually was one of the guys that voted maybe for him to be executed, and then he came back to life. I guess God is on this guy's side. I'm going to go tell other people about him. So he goes around, tells people about Jesus. They start little communities of faith, little churches all over the northern rim of the Mediterranean Ocean. So he's got a map here. This red line is Paul's final journey. He traveled all the way to Rome to try to tell the emperor about Jesus and to try to help him to become a follower. Tradition actually tells us that that's where Paul was executed, so it didn't go super well for him. But honestly, you look all across the northern rim there. Macedonia, Asia Minor, Galatia, and those cities, Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, all these different cities, Paul had started churches there. And he had done a lot of influential things to start to spread what Jesus had done, the good news. But the epicenter of Christianity was down here on the right, that little arrow, the city of Jerusalem. That's the area where Jesus had lived and done his ministry. That in Jerusalem is where he was executed, crucified. In Jerusalem is where the resurrection took place, and it's where all the apostles met, and the Christians there played a major role in the spread of Christianity throughout the world. Their strategy, their planning, their prayers. But as the years and the decades went by, the Christians in Jerusalem started to face really severe persecution, and they became outcast from the culture there. They didn't like the Christians. They were outcast outside of the temple system. They couldn't get jobs, and a lot of them were living in pretty severe poverty at that point. It's at this moment, Paul responding and coming up with a strategy to help those Christians in Jerusalem, that we see something that we might call reciprocity, or the idea of giving back to those that have given to you, giving to those that you're grateful or that your heart breaks for, and partnering together. Because those churches had benefited so significantly from the work of the Christians in Jerusalem. And now Paul says, hey, some of you have more money than you need. Let's collect it. Let's send it back to help those who are suffering. What a beautiful thing. And the way that he says about handling the money thing is really interesting. So he wrote a letter to the church in Corinth. If you have your Bibles, you can follow along. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 16. We're just going to look at a couple verses and see how it applies to us today about ordering our lives around generosity. So 1 Corinthians chapter 16, Paul's writing to these Christians that lived in the city of Corinth, and he says, about the collection for the Lord's people, which I take to mean he was talking specifically about the Jewish Christians, the Lord's people, they're the ones that are suffering, the ones in Jerusalem, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. He's saying, this is the same thing I've told all the other churches. This is what we're doing. The churches in the region of Galatia, I told them the same thing. Here's how we're going to handle this together. And he goes on in the next verse. He says, do on the first day of the week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income. First day of the week is an interesting thing that we often just pass over. What's the first day of the week? Sunday's the first day of the week. You got to remember, though, that this Christian faith had grown out of the Jewish religion. Their day of worship was Saturday. The Christians had started to do things on Sunday because that was the day that Jesus had risen from the dead. They changed the day of worship for a 3,000-year-old religion because that's the day that they thought Jesus had raised from the dead. That was the story. So he said, when you get together, set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income. It's a plan. You see here that they have a plan. They've thought about what they're going to do, and they've thought about what they're going to give, and what's the amount in keeping with your income, he says. This is a little Greek phrase. It basically says, as much as you have prospered, that's what you give in keeping with your income. Maybe a word that helps us understand this is the word percentage. And you're saying, Paul, well, be more specific. What's the exact amount? Or what's the exact percentage that I need to give? You'll never find Paul say the exact number. He just says, in keeping with your income. He says, well, Paul, give me the exact number. No, you choose. How grateful are you for what those Christians in Jerusalem have done? How much does your heart break for the way that they're suffering and they can't get jobs and they can't provide for their families? How much does your heart break? Set aside a sum of money in keeping with that. Saying you choose the amount. That right there is the New Testament pattern for generosity. You order your life, you choose an amount that's in keeping with your heart and your mind. Now, in the Old Testament, there was this thing called the tithe, 10%, where you'd give the first of the 10, whatever it was. You know, the first sheep, you get to keep the other 9. You give the first one, or you sacrifice the first one. The first sheaf of your harvest, you'd give that, you get to keep the following 9, that sort of idea. And that's something that's carried on in a lot of communities of faith to this day. But that's only part of the story. The Jewish system and their temple taxes, they actually had temple taxes that would get up sometimes close to 30%, maybe even more. And so these people were really used to it being built into their income. We actually have stories of Jewish communities across the world that would send caravans full of wealth back to Jerusalem, back to the temple, to fund the temple and what it was doing and the work, because that's how much they believed in it. And they would send, there were actually laws that some Roman provinces tried to pass to keep the money from coming out, so much money going out of the community. We want to tax you, not send it back to the temple, you know. So they would try to stop this sometimes. But then you get to the New Testament, and Paul really opens it up. And he says, you choose. In keeping with your income, you choose from a broken heart, from a grateful heart. How thankful are you? How much does it burden you what these people are going through? With that in mind, you choose where you're going to set it aside and where it's going to go. He goes on in the end of verse 2, he says, save it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. This is really interesting. Paul's essentially saying, when I get there, I don't have to do a song and dance and show you a bunch of slides of sad children and people starving in Jerusalem and just try to guilt you and motivate you to give, because you've already done it. You've done it every first day of the week. Before I got here, you set it aside in keeping with your income long before. You had a plan. You pre-decided long before I ever got there. And when I get there, I don't have to do some song and dance. We don't have to go through the motions. You don't have to feel like, I wish I could give more. Paul's here. I feel guilty. I don't want Paul to think that I'm not giving anything. I guess I got to give something. I wish I could give more. No, you'd already done it. He says, by the time I get there, it's already been set aside. You don't have to make collections just because I'm there. And then he finishes up at the end. He says, and then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men that you approve and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. Paul's saying, you're not giving the money to me. There's lots of accountability here. These are your individuals that you've chosen to deliver this gift. This is your gift. This is your choice. I'll write them letters of introduction to make sure that they get there safely. I'll handle their visas, their passports, make sure that they can have safe travel to their destination. I might even go with them if I need to, but this is your gift. This is your choice. This is your heart. This is a beautiful example of what the church can do and be. And why I really think that this is a beautiful thing for us to be a part of. What you see here is that Paul is just almost expecting that the community of believers had lives that were ordered around generosity, that their generosity was planned, it was prioritized, it was prepared. So we've really broken this down over the course of the last few weeks with this definition. Whenever we talk about being generous, and you see that reflected in the scripture that we just read, that to be generous is the premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation, which means to set free. What are you setting free? Personal financial assets. That first word there, premeditated, means that you got a plan. So I want us to say this out loud, that generosity requires a plan. Let's throw that up there at the bottom of the slide. Generosity requires a plan. Will y'all say that with me on three? 1, 2, 3. Generosity requires a plan. Some of you are like, I'm not a planner. Money is, I just drift through it. I just spend it when it comes. I just enjoy it. I don't have a plan. My husband or my wife is the planner. My boyfriend or my girlfriend, they're the planner, not me. Well, let me tell you what, you have a plan. You just don't know what it is because you're just drifting. If someone were to follow you around and just kind of keep track of your spending, they would say, hey, here's your plan. It might be a bad plan. and you maybe describe that plan as drifting, which drifting is never good. When you think of drifting, you think of like falling asleep while you're driving and you drift into another lane and the little bumps, oh gosh, I'm about to kill my whole family because I'm drifting out of the lane. I need to wake up and pay attention to what I'm doing. And sometimes we just drift. You think of a boat that, the motor's not working or it doesn't have anybody steering it and it just drifts. It can get beached on the sand because it was just drifting, getting moved by the waves. Now, when you think of drifting, sometimes you think of like floating down a river and how relaxing that is. But even then, you have to wave your arms every once in a while or a log is going to puncture your inner tube, right? Or you think of drifting with a car, and sometimes race cars will drift around a corner, and it's really cool. But you know that those drivers are practiced and planned, and they've really worked this out. If you and I tried to drift around a corner in a race car, you would crash into the median. Drifting is not good. Drifting, we drift off to sleep. We lose focus, and it's not something that's... So whenever you think of this financially, I want you to realize you plan towards what is good, you drift towards what is bad. And if you're drifting with your finances, I bet your plan is simply this: to spend what you got, consume it as it comes in, maybe save it, and then give if you've got any left over. You just consume it all. And then the saving part, maybe you don't even can really take credit for it because your employer takes it out to save it for you before you ever even get it, or you've got some app that is connected to your account and it just pulls the money out so you don't see it. And you're like, just take it away because if I see it, I'm going to spend it. And you're proud of that. It's not something to be proud of. I don't have the self-control. If I even see it, I'm going to spend it. And then I don't have anything left to give. I'd really like to, but there's nothing left over. This is what we might call a 3S sort of giver. 3S, it's spontaneous, sporadic, and sparing. Spontaneous meaning that you give when there's a need, when somebody guilts you, when somebody sells you or tries to motivate you, and you're like, I guess this is an occasion, and I'll give. Which means it's sporadic, meaning that it's not very consistent, not something that is regular, you're hit and miss. And it's sparing, meaning that you always feel, have you ever felt this way? I wish I could give more. I wish I could be more. I just don't have it. And the reason you don't have it is because you didn't plan. It wasn't a priority. It was the last thing on your list, and there was no plan. Generous people, so many people in this church have a plan. It's premeditated. And I would just encourage you, tomorrow or this afternoon, just come up with a plan. I don't care how incremental or progressive the plan is. Just start taking the thing that is at the end and put it at the beginning. Give first. Come up with a plan. The second part of our definition is the word calculated, meaning that generosity requires a specific amount or a percentage to go along with it. You get to decide ahead of time how much. And the example that's always stuck through with us, and I mentioned it earlier, is that tithe concept. Sometimes you'll think 10%, and it's really easy. Like my grandpa taught me, he would give me $10 on a Sunday morning, and he would say, this dollar is what you give to the offering, and you get to keep the other 9. And I was like, fantastic, $9 for a kid. I just loved it. I'm going to buy a bunch of candy now. And I was like, this is fantastic. And then you grow it out, you think, okay, I've got $100, I give the first 10, I live off of 90, or you save some of it, or something like that. You start adding zeros, though, and people freak out, don't you? You got 1,000, it's like, I'm going to give 100 away? That's a lot of money. Or 10,000, I'm going to give 1,000 away. You start feeling like it's a ton of money, but it's not, it's just a percentage. I give a percentage. So many generous people in this church give a percentage. That's why we're able to do so much. And if you choose a percentage, it's actually something that is in keeping with your income. You remember that phrase that Paul threw out? Something in keeping with your income. Say you have a bad year. Percentage reflects that. Maybe you have a great year. Percentage reflects that. Something in keeping with your income, it can be very consistent for who you are and what you're doing. This sort of calculation will make you what we'll call a 3P giver. We had 3S, this is 3P. You choose a percentage, you make giving it a priority. Again, we said it's the first thing you do, so it's a priority. The first thing you do when you get your paycheck or you get your commission, or the first thing you do when you get your tips, is you just say, this is the first thing, I'm gonna give it. And it's progressive, meaning that it grows with you. Maybe this whole concept scares you to death and you're like, how in the world would I ever do this? Well, start small. Start with 1%, half of a percent, I don't care. 3%, 7%, where are you? The 3's a Bible number. Jesus was raised on the third day. 7's a Bible number. God created the world, rested on the seventh day. 40's a Bible number, just throwing it out there. But I'm just saying, choose something that reflects where you're at and just start to progressively work forward. And you know what you'll find is over time, you'll actually want to bump that up. You'll bump up that percentage and you'll say, why in the world, why would anybody want to increase their giving and consume less? Well, that leads to the next part of our definition. We talked about having a plan and being calculated, choosing the amount. The next part is the designated part. You get to choose where it goes. What matters to you? What do you care about? Choose and give it to the thing that you care about. Now, some of you, this might be the reason why you don't like giving, because you never feel like you really get to choose where it goes. Like it was always a reaction. Giving is always in a reaction. Somebody motivates you or guilts you, and it felt impulsive, and then you walk away and you're like, man, I don't know that I really wanted to, but I felt guilted and I did it. And you don't really feel peace about that decision. You're like, it felt coerced. It felt forced. It's not something that my heart was really into. I just did it because everybody else was reaching in their wallet and I felt guilty. I felt like I had to pull my wallet out too. And this is something that you've really not enjoyed because you didn't get to choose where it went. What I'm talking about is different. I want you to choose ahead of time what you care about, what matters to you, set aside the amount and say, that's where I want it to go. That's where I want it to go. Where's your heart? What matters to you? Jesus said, and this is something that we've all heard, he said, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. Maybe you've been frustrated during this series over the last few weeks because your heart and what really matters to you is in a different place from where your money has been. I'm just asking you, why don't you bring those things together? If you don't like where your heart is, change the direction of your money. Your heart will follow that. If you feel like your money is not where your heart is, bring those two things together. Ask yourself an important question. What breaks my heart and what am I grateful for? Change where it's going, choose a percentage, and send it there. And you'll find that your heart will be so much more content. You'll even be proud of what you're doing. Generosity means to give from a grateful heart and from a broken heart. That's kind of what I want to learn. Let's move into give grateful heart and a broken heart. So ask yourself right now, what are you grateful for? What am I grateful for? I think this is the reason why anybody who loves their local church should give to their local church. If you don't love your local church, you should go find a local church that you love and you should give. I mean, if you wake up on Sunday morning and your kids actually want to go to church, praise the Lord, that's fantastic. I'm so grateful. My wife, and I, we get to come here. We got 5 kids in my house and they want to go to a classroom. We can just come in here and sit for it. I'm so grateful. There's coffee. There's people, there's nice music, and if you are grateful for your local church, you should give to support your local church. If you're grateful, if you've benefited from sermons or messages, if you enjoy the music or just the space, I've got physical space, I've got time set aside, and the busyness of the holidays and everything, you say, I just am going to go and I'm going to listen, I'm going to worship, I'm going to connect with people around me. If you're thankful for friendships, if you're thankful for opportunity and time to connect with God, if you're grateful for that, then you should give to support your local church. Now, just to brag on Compass, and I know that some of you are not from here, and maybe you're traveling because it's Thanksgiving and you're just in visiting, and I'm so grateful that you are. I hope you've had a great Thanksgiving. But just to know what our church is doing, and maybe you should go check out what your home local church is doing as well. We've been in an uncharted initiative the past 2 years. I've talked about it quite a bit through this series. But there was $35 million committed by members like many of you. We've already received over 30 million of that, and we're getting close to the end, and we're well on track. It's a beautiful thing. And what that has done is just really blown the doors open on what we've been able to do and what our potential is for the future. And already we have eliminated or avoided $8 million in debt as a church over the past couple of years. We gave $1 million to our missions partners in addition to what we already give them across the world. And we launched 2 new campuses, this being one of them, the other one in North Fort Worth. And it's just been an incredible year. This campus isn't even a year old yet. We launched in January. It's been phenomenal to be, I feel like this campus has almost been the beneficiary of the generosity of so many people. And you guys have also contributed significantly to that. But here's what's beautiful. We're only getting started. We've got so much in our future. We want to get land. We want to build our own building. It was beautiful. About 5 months ago, I sat with 2 city planners at Roots Coffee just talking about where we should have our church. They were excited that Compass was coming to North Richland Hills. Do you understand how unique that is? Because we are a tax-exempt organization. The city doesn't make money off of churches and taxes and things like that. They want us to come, even though they're not going to get tax revenue off of us. You know why? Because they're excited about the impact that our church will make in the community. It's going to make their community a better place. It's going to make a community a place where maybe neighborhoods benefit. People want to live here, and their quality of life increases. They were excited that Compass wanted to come. I was like, that's beautiful. I'm so thankful that we have a good reputation. There's a lot of churches that don't. A lot of communities that don't want churches. What a beautiful thing to be a part of. There are thousands of students, huge schools right around this area, thousands of students that we want to engage. And we want them to connect and know that God loves them. There are lots of families with young children that are looking for a church home, and maybe they don't know that we're here yet. But when they find us, I bet that they'll love us. And I'm just telling you, I found out that within 5 miles of this location, whenever we launched this campus, I discovered within 5 miles of this location, 250,000 people approximately live within 5 square miles of this place, a radius of 5 miles. 250,000 people. You want to blow the doors off of what we can do on into the future, give to support Compass North Richland Hills. And you can specify that online. That is if you love your local church. I'll tell you this, I am very grateful for you guys and thankful. We would not be where we're at without you guys and the potential of what we're going to be able to do on into the future. I'm telling you, we're in a beautiful place, and it's because of you. So I'm very, very thankful. Will you guys I know that I'm asking you to clap for yourselves, but would you just celebrate that? Now, in addition to supporting your local church, you should also find a charity or an organization that you love, and you should give to that and make it a priority. Something that breaks your heart, something that you're grateful for. Maybe it's a country. Maybe it's a specific need. Maybe it's a neighborhood that you really care about. Discover it. Give to support it. We do a lot of that through the church, but if you should decide, hey, I want to give directly to that. One of the things that you can do in order to become aware of that is to go through our Rooted initiative. Rooted is a discipleship experience. We group you up with other people, start to live out faith rhythms. And one of the things that we have you do is go serve with the local mission organization. And you get to discover what they're doing, how they're making an impact, what matters to them, what matters to you, who's suffering that they're meeting that need. And just becoming aware of that is a fantastic thing where you can start to discover, man, I'm so grateful for what they're doing. And it breaks my heart that people are suffering in that way. You should find something that matters to you, and you should give to it. Something that you're grateful for, something that breaks your heart. Then when somebody comes along and tries to guilt you or ask you or motivate you into giving, you don't have to feel guilty because you've already planned it, you've already set it aside, you've already prayed over it, you've chosen where it's going to go. And they can say, hey, would you come to my fundraiser? You say, yeah, I'll come. But don't tell me I'm not generous if I say no, because I've already planned it, I've already decided. I've done this ahead of time. I don't think there's many sermon series where we're going to teach you not how to say no to giving, but how to say yes to being generous. That's because you completely reorder your finances. And the thing that was at the end, giving, you take it and put it at the beginning. We used to spend it all, save a little, give if there's any left over. I'm saying flip that. And now you give first, then you save, and you live off of the rest. This reflects that your priorities have changed, that your heart is where your money is. What matters to you? What's important to you? This reflects what am I grateful for? And what gives me peace? And what sets me free? I think what this looks like is maybe when you have that once-in-a-lifetime event, your son or daughter's wedding, or the gala, or maybe you get invited to the presidential inauguration. I don't know what it is. And your wife is like, I got to get the perfect dress, goes on a safari. It's like, got to look every store, takes weeks to find it. And then she calls you up and she says, I found the perfect dress. And your first thought is, how much is it? And she says, it's $3,000. And your first thing is eBay. I'm going to resell this thing. Or we can return it. She's only wearing it once. You think, no, that's not the right thing to do. But then she says, hey, don't worry. As soon as I saw the price tag, all I could think of were those little faces of the kids that we sponsor in Uganda at the children's home. And it just didn't mean as much to me. This dress didn't matter to me that much. And I just thought about how much that money could do there. And that's where my heart is. And so she goes to Dillard's instead and gets a dress for $300. Or when you're at the truck dealership and you see this beautiful truck and it's just perfect, right? And you see the sticker and then you're like, nah, it just doesn't mean that much to me. Because you think about, I've invested in the Christians that are suffering and being persecuted in India. And some of them have been killed. Just because they believe, just because they meet, just because they read the Bible. You say, it just doesn't matter to me as much as it once did. Maybe you can afford both, but you're just like, it just doesn't matter to me as much. Because this other thing is a bigger priority. It's first in my life, and it's just kind of changed the way that I think and I feel. And it just doesn't matter to me. Plus, it's Texas. I mean, is it really a truck in Texas if it doesn't have a few dents and some rust on it? Just saying. But this is just something that reflects that your priorities and your heart have changed. Things are just different in your heart and your mind. I'll tell you, we watched that video earlier of Michelle Sherman talking about that children's home in Raigarh in India. I got to go there with them. And to see the looks on those little children's faces, I walked out of there just being like, I want to give them all my money. It just felt holy. It felt sacred. And it felt like God was really happy with what was going on there. And you just start to give to that stuff. And other things, no, there's nothing wrong with them. I hope you make a lot of money and get all the stuff that you ever want. But you just stop wanting the stuff as much. Your whole life starts to reorient a little bit because you became generous or because you are generous. You said, I'm going to give first, then I'll save, and I'll live off of the rest. What this does is it creates a new cycle. And I want to throw the new cycle up there. The new cycle says you give first, then you save. Let's throw the next one up. You give first, then you save, then you live, and then you have peace. Isn't that a nice thing? We sing songs about joy and peace during the holidays. Most of us don't have it, though. You reorder your finances to give, save, live, and then experience peace. You say, I'm content, I'm happy, I'm thankful, I'm grateful for what God's doing among us. That's a totally different cycle. And people will look and say, you're crazy. You give first before you consume? And you say, yeah, I know it's crazy, but it's a better version of crazy than the old cycle where I just spent everything and I went into debt, had no margin. I was worried all the time. I was anxious. I just decided to reorder my life because this leaves you discontent and frustrated and empty and wanting more all the time. No, thank you. I'll take the new crazy. I'll take this one where things just are reordered. And you start to live, you know what? It's not mine anyway. Someday somebody's going to come through. They're going to box up all my stuff and sell it, trade it, auction it, throw it away. I don't know. Be somebody else's to consume at that point. It was never really mine in the first place. I just got to possess it for a little while. And just because it came to me doesn't mean that it's necessarily for me. You start to see yourself with an opportunity, a responsibility even, to take what was given to you and to give it to those who need it. This is a different kind of crazy, and it's the off-ramp for the kind of crazy that leaves you worried and discontent and frustrated. This is a better way to be crazy. And Jesus said you'll be happier. It's more blessed to give than receive. Happier, blessed are those who order their lives around giving rather than receiving. Happier is the person who learns to live a generous life. Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Thank you so much.